WFLA Now will begin momentarily. WFLA Now will begin momentarily. Live from the Stream Center in Tampa, Florida. Top stories, breaking news, interactive coverage in the palm of your hand. This is WFLA Now, powered by 1-800-ASK-GARY. Here's JB Buno.
Alex Murdaugh seeking a new trial. His team presenting new evidence claiming the trial's clerk of court tampered with the jury to help secure a book deal on the trial that ended with Murdaugh being found guilty of murdering his wife Maggie and son Paul. We're live here in the Stream Center ahead of a 2:30 Eastern press conference called by Murdaugh's defense team. Hello, folks. Welcome into the Stream Center. JB here with you live on WFLA Now, streaming live presently on WFLA.com, the WFLA app, as well as on the WFLA YouTube page, where I see a lot of folks filing in early ahead of the 2:30 Eastern press conference. Begins in less than 25 minutes from now. There's Alex Murdaugh from 6 months ago, of course, found guilty, now serving a double life sentence at the McCormick Correctional Institution in South Carolina for murdering his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul. 6 months later, there's been a lot of headlines coming out of South Carolina connected to Alex Murdaugh. We're going to break down some of them because we haven't talked about this story in some time. But really, all eyes are on the 2:30 press conference where we're expected to hear more about this new evidence. And really what the new evidence entails are accusations of the clerk, a clerk that is accused of tampering with the jury, and we're going to get into those particulars. That clerk, going by the name of Becky Hill or Rebecca Hill, according to the filing, she is accused of instructing jurors not to be misled by evidence presented in Mr. Murdaugh's defense, telling jurors not to be fooled by Mr. Murdaugh's testimony in his own defense. According to the Murdaugh legal team of Jim Griffin and Dick Harpootlian, two names you probably remember from the trial if you watched the trial, these constitute jury tampering, and they are, of course, using that as grounds to seek a new trial in the double murders of Maggie and Paul. This is going to be filed and has been filed, really, a motion that has been filed in South Carolina, the Court of Appeals this Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. To break down how likely this is, I've invited the lawyer Peter Tragos, to join me on stream. That right there is Buster Murdaugh, Alex Murdaugh's surviving son, who's been in the news in his own right the last week or so, doing his first interview in the aftermath of his dad being found guilty of murdering Buster's brother, Paul, and his mom, Maggie. He stands by his father, claims that he doesn't think it's possible that his father murdered Maggie and Paul, saying that he feels the exact words were that there was a tilted table as far as right there, the trial that took place and culminated with a verdict in March of this year, but also said that as far as people that refer to his dad or think of his dad as a psychopath, that is a fair assessment, according to Buster. So an interesting interview with Fox Nation. They had the interview there with Buster Murdaugh. So many people were wanting to know what was going through Buster Murdaugh's mind during this lengthy trial in South Carolina, watching his dad, speak very candidly, at least in the estimations of many who know him, speak very candidly about his addiction to opioids, his embezzlement, the accusations of embezzlement and swindling people out of their money. All of it being left on the courtroom floor, so to speak, and Buster Murdaugh just sat there for weeks hearing a lot of this testimony. So now that he is speaking, that, of course, has brought the Alex Murdaugh trial back into public view, as has this press conference now. Again, Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin expected to be speaking at 2:30. We're here in the Stream Center. We have multiple feeds to bring you here in the Stream Center. This room is designed, of course, always to bring you the highest quality feed that we have. We have backups for our backups. And we're going to have multiple different press conference feeds coming in from South Carolina, where, of course, Jim Griffin and Dick Harpootlian are going to be speaking again in about 20 minutes time. Also here in the Stream Center, our ability to interact with you, our audience. You can use hashtag KJB, and I'll be featuring some of your comments here over the coming 20 minutes, any questions that you might have. But also, too, your questions might also be best posed for our legal expert on stream, Peter Tragos, the lawyer just hopping on the Zoom room there. Hey, Peter, how are you?
What's up, man?
Hey, man, are we going to have to put you on retainer or something? Because this is, I like to feature you on stream quite a bit just because you're a local guy and, we get along.
I'm happy to be here, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. This stuff's interesting to me. And when new stuff happens, I like discussing kind of instant reactions, with how it makes us feel, what we think, how it can affect the process. I think that's fun.
Yeah, no, it certainly is interesting to make sense of all of this and going through, of course, how the legal system in this country works, right? And is it working to the best of its ability? Are we finding? It's all about getting to justice, finding the truth, right? I mean, I think that's something you and I very much agree on. And as far as finding the truth and seeing if and really the checks and balances system on whether or not there was justice in South Carolina last March, the team of Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin, that's the legal team who represented Alex Murdaugh, they are now presenting and revealing this new evidence claiming that Becky Hill, the Colleton County Clerk of Court, they claim that she tampered with the jury. What was before we go to our audience and their gut reaction, what was your gut reaction to this news?
If the reports are correct that Ms. Hill actually spoke to jurors, got their opinions, disregarded the defendant's case and the defense attorney's arguments, removed jurors she thought might vote not guilty, encouraged jurors that were on the guilty side, made any indication that they would be famous after if there was a guilty verdict or not a mistrial, and she would go with them for interviews in the future and write her book and do all of this for her own financial gain or fame, then I think that this absolutely is pointing in the direction of a new trial. I know it's not what most people want to hear, but I mean, for a guy who played the legal system and used it against a lot of people, to have it played against him like this is still something that we in America should not look blindly at. It's not something that we should just turn the other cheek and say, well, there you go, because two wrongs don't make a right. And I really don't think that this is the appropriate way to handle the process. Again, if what the reports are about this action by an officer of the court is very serious, they are seen as a neutral party. They are seen as someone the jury looks up to and appreciates and looks to for guidance, not just the judge, but the court staff. And the clerk of court is somebody that is very involved in the process, that's seen every day, that sees the evidence and hears the arguments and hears the jury speaking, and is in a lot of situations that the judges, the lawyers, the parties are not in. And to abuse that position is something that we need to come down hard on, and we can't just let slide.
So
we as America.
Right. So is it fair to say that these are serious accusations?
Absolutely. These are not, oh, well, we figured out that the blood stain was not tested 7,000 to the nth degree, and it's just 6,000 billion% chance that it was him. It's not something like that. It's not a rounding error. It's not a little bit of argument and opening statement by the prosecutor or things that do not change the outcome of the trial. These allegations, potentially fake Facebook posts to get people thrown off the jury. I mean, those are serious allegations when you're messing with specific jurors based on the way you think they may lean with their vote.
Peter, you're the expert here legally. I'd like to think that I'm someone who keeps my finger on the pulse of social media and reads through thousands. It's my job to read through thousands of comments. And let me just kind of fill you in on what I have seen as sort of the immediate reaction to this. The immediate reaction that I have seen is from people on social media. Most of the comments that I have seen thus far, this is Alex Murdaugh attempting to weasel his way out of the double life sentence that found him in McCormick Correctional Institution in South Carolina. There are people who are saying online that this is somebody who, for so many years, found every tiny loophole that there was to swindle people out of their money, doing everything he could, finding the back channels of our legal system to take advantage of our legal system and manipulate the law in his favor. That's the initial gut reaction that I'm seeing from a majority of people on social media. But based on what you're saying here, these are serious accusations. And if they are proven to be true, is this a do-over? I mean, are we doing this all over again at some point in the not too distant future?
I think it's a real possibility. And again, if Alex Murdaugh were to win on these kinds of allegations, it would not be an acquittal. He would not go home, obviously, because he's going to plead to federal charges as well this month, so reports say, but it would be a new trial. It would be a do-over. And I totally understand where everybody's coming from with legal technicalities and loopholes, and we've heard of things like this happening in the past, which is why when we talk on this channel and everywhere else about Brian Kohberger, about Rittenhouse, about whatever criminal case we're talking about, and we say the state needs to do it right. They need to be above board. All rules need to be followed. The constitutional rights of the criminal defendant need to be protected, because if they are not, and someone's right to a fair trial is trampled on, like these allegations would make it seem for Alex Murdaugh, then we have to do it all over again. And nobody wants the rights to be protected more than the victims to have to do this once, get some finality and get some justice. Because if we have to do this all over again, I mean, it's going to be brutal for this family.
It's going to, of course, take up more resources, more time. When people, I think in large part, mostly, again, having my finger on the pulse of social media, I think most people feel as if, having watched the trial unfold, there were a lot of people, at least in the court of public opinion, a majority of people, based on the research that we did, felt that Alex Murdaugh was, in fact, guilty of murdering his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul. Let's get to, we have a lot more to go over, and we only have about 10 minutes to do so, but we want to feature your comments with hashtag HeyJB, hashtag LawyerYouKnow, and Peter, of course, is going to be doing content on his own channel at some point this afternoon. I think 3 o'clock, you said, Peter, correct?
I think I pushed it to 3:30 so I could come do this, hang out for a while, and then the conference is at 2:30, so I'm going to go on 3:30.
Sounds good. Let's get to Tina, hashtag HeyJB. If it goes back to trial, will there be a new judge in the case? The judge, for those of you who forgot his name, Clifton Newman. There were some people who really appreciated Judge Newman's very grounded approach to that trial and how he navigated a very difficult and complex set of circumstances. What do we say to Tina's comment here, Peter?
So they could. I think there's like a mandatory retirement age that he was talking about, and I don't know when this new trial would be. I know they demanded a speedy trial last time. So there's going to be all different technicalities legitimately that are going to be argued about post appeal if there is a new trial. So I think it is possible to be Newman, but I don't know if he'll have to retire or if they'll leave him on just to handle this case again, to not waste resources and have some other judge try to come in and figure out how to handle this case. Maybe the defense doesn't want him to be on it, so they'll continue the case until he has to mandatorily retire, because some people didn't agree with some of the decisions Judge Newman made on the prior bad acts. But those are the types of arguments that are within judicial discretion. An appellate court's going to make his decision, and Alex Murdaugh's probably not going to win. So when we talk about those kind of appellate issues, it's very different than the clerk of court tampering with jurors. That is a much different allegations than, oh, I disagree with the judge's ruling.
Cat, hashtag LawyerYouKnow. Peter, does the court reporter answer to Judge Newman? And if so, and these allegations are true, then would there be any repercussions for Judge Newman?
So the clerk of court is different than the court reporter. The court reporter is the person that's typing down the words everybody says. The clerk of court helps run the court, and they handle a lot of the exhibits and the evidence, and they talk to jurors and they talk to the judge. It's basically the judge's right-hand person. So they do answer to the judge ultimately, but in this situation, Dick Harpootlian has written a letter asking the FBI to investigate this clerk of court, to go and interview jurors and talk to see if there are actual criminal repercussions based on the clerk of court and the allegations they made about the clerk of court. So she could eventually be answering to the FBI and the legal system, depending on what they find in their investigation.
I want to read it here. This is from the filing. Miss Hill, again, this is, we're talking about Rebecca Hill, folks. This is, or Becky Hill, the Colleton County Clerk of Court that Peter is describing here. And this is from that court filing. It says, Miss Hill had frequent private conversations with the jury foreperson, a court-appointed substitution for the foreperson the jury elected for itself at the request of Miss Hill. Miss Hill did these things to secure herself a book deal and media appearances that would not happen in the event of a mistrial. Miss Hill betrayed her oath of office for money and fame. Once these two facts are proven, the law does not allow the court any discretion about how to respond. It must grant a new trial. I think it was something in the roughly 60 pages long, a very lengthy court filing here. What does the process look like now, Peter? I mean, this is being launched in the South Carolina Court of Appeals. So how does the appellate process work here going forward now?
So I haven't seen all of the filings, but I think that they're filing a stay for the appeal to ask the court for a new trial based on this new evidence. And there are certain circumstances where you can do things like that. And this is one of them. When you find completely new evidence that somebody tampered with the jury, let's not go through the entire appellate process. This should be obvious enough for the court to grant the motion for new trial and do this all over again.
You know, it's interesting timing. You can't ignore the timing of everything that is. There's been a lot of Murdaugh. I've seen you cover it on your show, Peter. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of Murdaugh headlines the last few weeks, from Alex Murdaugh having his tablet privileges revoked, or at least not fully revoked. I mean, he has to go through a process to request prison tablet use. The jailhouse selfie that came out, the fact that he's been receiving love letters, and that he then lost phone privileges for recordings that were done by Jim Griffin for Fox Nation as well. Canteen privileges as well. So a lot. And then, of course, probably biggest of all, Buster Murdaugh speaks to Fox Nation in his first interview since this all unfolded 6 months ago. All of this happening at once. Look, you're an attorney, Peter. I mean, we're talking is coincidence, or is this all happening very closely together for a very particular reason?
So what's interesting about that to me is, normally I would say, I mean, they don't control when Fox Nation is going to put out their docuseries. They don't control a lot of this stuff. They may have something to do with it when they grant interviews and when they don't, except for the fact that when he lost phone privileges, it was for reading diary or journal entries to his lawyer, Jim Griffin, who was recording it on the other side of the phone, potentially or allegedly abusing the attorney-client privilege phone calls. And then those recordings being part of that Fox Nation docuseries. And then Jim Griffin obviously also involved in these new filings and in the appeal. So when you have some of the same characters involved and they are being kind of open and out there in the media, maybe it's not a coincidence.
I want to show everybody for the first time here. Let's go full screen. And we just missed it by a moment. But the amount of press located here at the court building in the Low Country of South Carolina it's pretty wild. This is on par with what we saw 6 months ago as far as the sheer volume of media. The whole point of this, Peter, of course, from a PR perspective, is to gain as much attention as possible, right? I mean, if you're Dick Harpootlian and you're Jim Griffin, you want this to receive as much attention as possible. You want there to be momentum towards, basically being granted a new trial. At least that's how an attorney would approach it, correct? Yeah,
I mean, you want public outrage at the injustice. That's what it comes down to, is if they can convince the public that this was outrageous and totally unfair. And what if this happened to you or a family member or someone you loved? How would you want it to happen? How would you want it to play out in the court system? And if it doesn't, what are we going to do about it? Right. And that's something that's been asked of people in our country more than it ever happened before over the last few years, right? Is if you see this injustice, are you going to complain about it? Are you going to go and protest? Are you going to say something on social media? What are you going to do about it to, find a victim who's missing? And we've seen people come together, and we've seen some real pressure being applied by the public in the court and legal system over the last few years.
So as we get ready for this press conference, let's play fortune teller for a second, Peter. We'll get you I'll send you a crystal ball for your live streams. Maybe we'll have one here too. Just the idea of what exactly you expect happening in the future. This is really fresh, so this is kind of your raw take on we're still going through paperwork, and there's still a lot to make sense of here with this new court filing. But how do you see this taking shape over the coming months, maybe the coming year? I mean, are we staring at a new trial? Does it change the outcome? Could it actually overturn the double life sentence that Alex Murdaugh received from Judge Newman after he was, of course, convicted in the murders of his wife and his son? I mean, what does this change, and what do you see happening in the future?
So I think, as I say, when any lawyer writes a motion or we read a legal document written by one side, it should be very believable and convincing. So I expect the press conference today to be convincing and their words to really prove their points. But we've got to see what the other side responds with. And it looks like they're talking. I don't know if we want to jump to that, and we can come back after.
Yeah, let's listen in, Peter.
So I'm going to read a statement. Jim Griffin will have a couple words to say, and then we'll answer questions. Today, Jim Griffin and I filed a petition based on newly discovered evidence with the South Carolina Court of Appeals to stay Alex Murdaugh's appeal while a hearing is held on a motion for a new trial. Concurrently, we've sent a request to the South Carolina U.S. Attorney to open a federal investigation into the violation of Alex Murdaugh's civil rights. The allegations in the petition filed today speak for themselves, but we believe they explain a number of peculiarities in the 6-week trial. We request that SWED stand down on initiating any investigation of these allegations, since they are heavily invested in maintaining Alex's convictions. We suggest they wait for the Court of Appeals to rule and receive direction from the trial court. If the Court of Appeals remands the case for an evidentiary hearing, if the Court of Appeals remands the case for an evidentiary hearing, we would also request that those in the media and the public respect the privacy of those in filing. Jim and I want to thank those on our team who stand behind us and have worked tirelessly to ferret out the truth. Alex Murdaugh maintained and still maintains his innocence in the murder of Maggie and Paul, and believes the truth will ultimately prevail. Jim?
The right to a jury trial.
Stand over here.
The right to a jury trial is a fundamental principle of our justice system. Jurors must be free from outside influences and must decide the case solely on the evidence presented in the courtroom, subject to the rules of evidence, subject to the rules of the court, and, most importantly, subject to the crucible of cross-examination that's guaranteed by the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution, and that is the right to confront witnesses. When jurors receive private communications outside the confines of a public courtroom, the Sixth Amendment is violated and numerous other constitutional rights are violated. And that's not Jim Griffin on the law, that is the law of the land. And I want to quote from a decision from the South Carolina Court of Appeals, which is behind me, and states this: where there is a private communication of a court official to members of the jury, an occurrence which cannot be tolerated if the sanctity of the jury system is to be maintained, a new trial must be granted unless it clearly appears that the subject matter of the communication was harmless and could not have affected the verdict. What we had filed today, supported by sworn testimony of jurors, is that the clerk of court had improper private communications with the jurors, and the subject matter of those communications was the credibility of the defense that the Murdaugh legal defense team put up, and it was the believability of the defendant's own testimony. Now, there's been a lot of talked about whether Alex should have taken the stand. I can assure you, when we considered what factors and what we should and should not do and considered whether he should take the stand, we never considered the likelihood, as reported to us by the jurors, that the clerk of court would go in to the sanctity of the jury room before he testified and tell the jurors, don't be fooled by his testimony. And no reason to believe that it's not. There's no choice but the courts to grant a new trial.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay.
When the person was pulled away at Moselle, did you guys see that, or did you find out after the fact?
Well, I think we observed it. We did. No, I was there.
Oh,
Yeah. I was there. I watched it. But, I mean, look, we were not looking to impute any nefarious conduct. But clearly what the jurors reported to us, that they were off talking, the forelady and the clerk. I saw them together, but, I wasn't watching. I believe, look, I've been doing this almost 50 years. The bedrock of any trial, and I've done hundreds of them, is that the clerk of court is the person that makes sure the jury gets their food. If they're put up for the night, someplace to stay, their travel accommodations are met. They're not someone that ever should talk to them about the case. I've never had it happen. Again, I've been doing this for a very long time. Never heard of it happening until this case.
And one thing we want everyone to understand, that the clerk of court is an elected official by the people, not appointed by the judge, not appointed by the judiciary. It's a public official who's elected and is an independent state actor. And so what we're complaining about in the motion that we filed today is the conduct of an elected official, not conduct by Judge Newman or anybody in the unified court system.
And I think it's important also to understand that she is a state actor, and that's why we forwarded today a letter to the U.S. Attorney asking them to open an investigation into the violation of Alex Murdaugh's civil rights by a state actor under color of state law.
I believe you guys have 4 jurors that you had affidavits for in the paperwork you filed. Did they reach out to you, or did you guys reach out to them?
Well, this is an interesting story. Let Jim tell you.
So immediately in the aftermath of the verdict, we had received information that we needed to look into what happened in the jury room. We started down that road, and we met a zone of silence. No jurors would speak to us. And so we were, what I like to call, we were given the Heisman, right? And then when the clerk of court wrote her book, published her book, that zone of silence collapsed. And jurors were upset about that, the ones we talked with, and they were more than willing to come forward and tell us the things that we had sort of heard through a whisper campaign. And so as a result of that, we were able to interview some jurors. Now, there were still a number of jurors who maintained that zone of silence, who have not talked to us. We did try to reach out to most all of them that we could get in touch with, but the information we got, I can tell you, was independent of each juror. The first juror we talked to, we got information about Ms. Hill saying, "Don't be fooled." And then the second juror, independent of the first juror, says the same thing, and the third juror, independent of the other two, say the same thing. And so we're very confident that the information is accurate.
Well,
the expectation timeline.
What
a ruling will be, how fast you want it?
Ask them. I mean, we don't have any control over that. We just did receive a notice from the Court of Appeals that the Attorney General has 10 days to respond to our motion. Okay? Now, I think what's interesting to me, again, having done this for so long, is that once we had that initial contact with that first juror, we began going around. We had a list and knocking on, literally on Sundays, knocking on jurors' doors, asking them to speak with us. Some of them wouldn't come out. Some of us told us never to come back. But some did, and some talked to us. I'll give you an example. And one of the things we heard was once the jury went out, even though there were 6 smokers and they were given smoke breaks during the entire trial, once the jury went out, they were told no more smoke breaks. No, you people that want nicotine, you're going to have to get a verdict first. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. Now, that indicates something, and the court would be the one to communicate that. Why? So a bunch of folks told us stuff that appeared to be inconsequential, but in the total context indicated to us that what we've put in this petition about the Clerk is credible, and based on sworn testimony from 2 jurors, and we interviewed a third. My paralegal, Holly Miller, has given you an affidavit or filed an affidavit on what she told us. A lot of these folks just don't want to get involved, but they're going to be involved if we get a hearing, because each and every one of them is going to have to testify in an open court before you as to what happened and what didn't happen.
It would appear that
Wait, one at a time. Who?
It would appear that Judge Newman was at least aware of some of the allegations that you talk about in your motion. For example, the Facebook post with juror 785, and the judge actually said, "Oh boy, I'm not too pleased about the clerk interrogating a juror as opposed to coming to me and happening it to me."
And that's a good point. There's no suggestion that the judge did anything untoward. But what that does do, if it comes back, he may end up being a witness. So, I mean, but until the Court of Appeals acts, that issue does not have to be dealt with.
But if the fact is that the court was aware of some of these issues but still didn't intervene, how concerned are you?
We don't know. We don't know that he didn't intervene. That's what I'm saying. He's a witness. We need to know.
Do you feel that this evidence is strong enough such that it could have changed the verdict had it been introduced in trial?
You know, that's not the legal test. The legal test is the subject matter prejudicial to the defense. It's not would it have made a difference in the outcome. Was the subject matter of the improper private conversation material to the defense? If it's immaterial, like what do you want to have for dinner? Do you want to take a smoke break? Do you want to go home? Those are immaterial matters. But when the subject matter is, and is reported under oath by these jurors, it was a direction on how you should receive Alex Murdaugh's testimony. You should look at him. Don't be fooled by him. That subject matter is absolutely material. That's the core of our defense, and that is something that we had no chance to defend against. And so we strongly believe if that evidence is accurate, and the law will require a new trial.
So when was the last time you spoke with your client?
Charged?
When was the last time
No
you spoke
comment.
with your client, and what has he shared with you in this latest motion?
Well, I can't talk about attorney-client privilege information. I can tell you that when I shared with him the affidavits, he's a lawyer. He was astonished. He was shaking. He was in disbelief, and he thanked Mr. Harpootlian, Mr. Barber, and myself for spending our weekends on dirt roads in Colleton County.
And by the way, we've seen more of Colleton County on dirt roads, in places we're city boys, we didn't believe existed in this state, looking for folks that would talk to us. A lot of doors slammed in our face. A lot of doors slammed in our faces.
Do you think Ms. Hill should still have her job?
I'm sorry?
Do you think Ms. Hill should still have her job?
No comment. I'm sorry, what?
The Facebook posting from the ex-husband of the dismissed juror. There's a lot of detail in there about that. And there's some in-camera transcripts there as well. Was this not something that was just handled very quickly? The fact that you guys are alleging it didn't exist at all and perhaps was conspired to be created to get this juror dismissed?
Yes.
That's a very serious allegation.
It's all serious. Everything we've alleged, everything in those affidavits is serious. This is a very serious matter. And again,
So what you see in the sworn testimony that's been filed today is Ms. Hill told the court that there was a Facebook post by this juror's ex-husband. The ex-husband has filed an affidavit saying, "I've never posted a Facebook post." Ms. Hill in her office says he must have deleted it. We can't find it. But they produced a Facebook post from someone with the same name apologizing for an earlier Facebook post, and that Satan made him do it, and et cetera, et cetera. And Ms. Hill related that as being this juror's ex-husband. Ms. Hill had this juror's ex-husband's photograph. You can match them up; they don't match. And what we do know, and we laid it out in detail in our brief, is that the apology Facebook post was posted, I think, on February 16th, and said we had deleted it the day before, February 15th. Ms. Hill is telling Judge Newman on February 23rd that I just saw this Facebook post. Impossible. Impossible. We also have in there sworn testimony that Ms. Hill told this juror that SLED went out and confirmed with your ex-husband that he posted that. Not true, according to the sworn testimony.
And Phil Barber and I and Howie Miller from my office went down and interviewed the ex-husband, and he allowed us to, I wouldn't know how to do it, but Phil did, to download his entire Facebook history. None of that is in there. So, I mean, again, we've done what we can do. We're not the police. You know, we have no way to compel anybody to talk to us or give us anything. We've asked very nicely. Now, I will say this. The two jurors that gave affidavits have an attorney, Joe McCullough, who was skulking around here a moment ago back there. So if you want to know about those two jurors, you may want to have a chat with him.
What's the motivation of the jurors talking to you?
Wait, what?
What's the motivation, do you think, of the jurors talking to you? Are they upset with the clerk?
I think they were upset with the way things went, and the clerk, I think they may very well, yes, they're upset with the clerk. They're upset with the way this played out.
Are they regretting their vote?
Can't comment on that.
The Facebook post, the person who posted the original post, have you ever gotten an opportunity to speak with them? And if so,
No. I mean, the original post, we don't know whether it ever existed.
But the apology post, did you speak with him, Phil?
No, we did not speak.
Do you have a timeline from the FBI regarding your request for investigation?
Well, as you know, having talked to the FBI before, no. They're not going to tell us anything.
In your letter to the U.S. Attorney, you mentioned the importance of having the FBI investigate as opposed to SLED, for example. Can you talk about the importance of having the FBI involved?
Well, having anybody but SLED investigate it. SLED is very invested in this conviction. How invested? Well, the agent, David Owens, that testified under cross-examination by Jim, admitted two things. One, he perjured himself in front of the grand jury. And two, he fabricated evidence. SLED made him this year's Law Enforcement Officer of the Year. So is that the agency that ought to be going to jurors? I don't think so. I think that the court, if this is remanded back, the trial court should pick somebody else. If the FBI is not doing it, then there's the sheriff's departments, there are other folk, not Colleton County, but other sheriff's departments that they could go out and interview jurors or bring them to court. I mean, all these jurors are going to end up testifying anyway. There may not be any reason to go out and interview them. They may just put a subpoena on them, bring them to court.
how important is your appeal to jurors to testify under oath in a place where, like you say, through the zone of silence, and they have to go and talk to y'all before?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that would happen if we get the hearing that we've requested. That's why we've requested the hearing, so that we can get subpoena power, and we can get some subpoena, not just individuals come to court, jurors come to court, witnesses come to court, but subpoena records, phone records, for example, emails, for example. I mean, so with a hearing, we have a broad array of assets at our disposal to bring evidence to court. Right now, we've got nothing except Jake's Mercedes and dirt roads in Colleton County.
Have you spoken to any jurors who reviewed what the other jurors are saying?
No, we've not had any juror contradict anything what the other jurors are saying. What you saw in some of the affidavits is the jurors were separated in two rooms and sort of broke up from, guys in one room, gals in another room. I don't know if that was appropriate. Men in one room, females in another room, and so the comments that we've gotten on the sworn affidavits come from the ladies' room, if you will, more so than the men's room. But we do have information that we submitted from one juror where he does acknowledge that she talked to him about evidence, about autopsy photos, and don't be upset about them. I mean, that should not be happening. That should not be happening. And this juror is a smoker, and he relayed to us basically the coercive effect of people who have a nicotine habit not able to smoke
Until they reached a verdict.
Until they reached a verdict. And so that's what we got.
Wait a second.
I
Yeah.
had an issue with the cable at the very. Can you read that the initial motion to me real fast? Because I had an issue with sending.
Do what now?
The motion you read. Can you read that? The very first thing. I didn't catch it.
I mean, I'll read it for you after we get done with this, but I don't think I ought to keep all these folks doing that.
Forward, would you request a change of venue?
Well, you got to get a new trial before you get there, and that's not something we're going to talk about today. And, yes, ma'am. We don't. Well, we know some of the statements were made in front of the jurors in the one jury room. Now, understand I think there were only 6 jurors in that room, or maybe 8. I'm not sure, but not all the jurors would have been present for all the statements. Clearly, they were given in one room or the other.
And just to be clear, the catalyst for reinvestigating this was publication of this book.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So we didn't stop investigating, but we were hitting brick walls until her book came out, and then jurors who obviously were not comfortable with how she handled matters were even less comfortable with her going on a book tour and making money off what she did. That's what was reported to us.
So she has said her book is self-published. That really doesn't sound like somebody who's getting a lot of money. What do you say to that if somebody says, well, she just self-published?
Well, she's trying to make a lot of money. That's the point. I mean, she's trying to make money off of it. She's selling the book. I mean, the question is, was it a successful scheme? I don't know. I mean, if you've read it, I'm not going to give a book review here, but I don't know that you buy the book. I mean, it's not well written. The story she tells is not accurate, in our opinion, at least the facts as we saw them.
What did you think about the passage of her book that describes going to Moselle with the jurors?
Well, you know, the problem I have with what she says in there is, after going to Moselle, we, if you notice, she used the plural we, felt such and such and such and such. Is that the jurors and her? I mean, I think that's great cross-examination for her when she testifies in this matter before the trial judge, if the Court of Appeals sends it back.
Do you want any hearing in this matter to be public?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want all y'all there. We miss you. Any other questions?
Did you ever
You said you're
contact?
investigating. So along your investigations into the alleged jury misconduct and these allegations, have you uncovered any additional things that you would present in a second trial for your defense?
Let's not talk about that.
Yeah, no. If we are lucky enough to get a second trial, you have to wait and see. You know, we're not going to disclose any of that today.
Have you
What
tried
is your
to?
optimism for getting for this motion?
I'm very optimistic that ultimately we will get a new trial. How long that'll take, I don't know.
Have you tried to reach Clerk Hill, ask her any questions about any of this?
We've not reached out to Clerk Hill. We had reached out to some other folks, and based on the information we received, we thought it would be pointless to reach out.
Do you have any alternate suspect or suspects?
What now?
Do you have any alternate suspects or suspects in the case?
We're focused on getting him a new trial. That's what we've been working on. Anything else? No? Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Let me read this statement to him real quick. Oh, shit. Who wanted a statement?
That is Mr. Harpootlian, Mr. Griffin, and Mr. Barber speaking after Alex Murdaugh's new motion has been filed in the Court of Appeals in South Carolina. They are seeking a new trial, and you heard Griffin there say that they are very optimistic, but also said, hey, if we're lucky enough to have a new trial. So it's, of course, now in the hands of the legal system in South Carolina, and that's, of course, where we bring back in our legal expert, Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, joining us right here from the Tampa Bay area. Peter, I have questions for you, but I just want to get to your gut reaction here. What did you think at the press conference?
Yeah, it's about what I expected when they're telling the story. I expected to sound really good for their side, and it did. If she really did fabricate Facebook posts, if she was not truthful about what and when she saw and the timeline of when the apology was written versus the original post of a supposed ex-husband of a juror, which ended up getting that juror struck. If she was talking to the jurors about autopsy photos, about the defense team's arguments, about the believability of the defendant when he took the stand, what were the conversations that happened at Moselle when she used words like we in her book, totally inappropriate conversations for the clerk of court to have with jurors. And, the content of that just, it reeks of affecting the defendant's ability to get a fair trial. It doesn't mean that the verdict would have been different had she not said anything. But guess what? We do not live in the world in which she did not say anything according to these allegations. So we don't know that answer. And that's why it does kind of sound like something that's moving towards a new trial if what they are saying is to be believed.
Back to something that you said at the beginning there. There's two, and I want to hammer this home for people. There's two sides to every story. We have not heard from Becky Hill since this court filing, of course, has come to public light. We, of course, anticipate at some point her being an elected official. You would imagine that at some point she is going to issue something. We don't have any insight on whether or not she is going to issue something, but this is somebody who has written a book and has profited off of the Alex Murdaugh case. I have other questions to ask you, Peter, but that was heavily emphasized in this press conference. The fact that Becky Hill, again, this is the person who is the clerk of court, wrote this book. As we go back, that was just a live shot, just showing you some of the other, what's going on there in South Carolina. Somebody who wrote a book to document what she saw over the course of the Alex Murdaugh trial. To my knowledge, there's no law that prevents her from being able to write a book and to share her perspective and what it was like being the clerk of court in such a high-profile trial. But Peter, is it? What do you think of that? What do you think of somebody who is an elected official, a clerk of court, writing a book after a trial like this, and of course that book being for profit?
Yeah, I think it's totally inappropriate when you're supposed to have a position that is fair and balanced. You're not political. You're not for one side or the other. You're not for the prosecution. You're not for the defense. You're not for the plaintiffs. You're there to do your job and make sure it's a fair system and moves smoothly and appropriately and keeps things organized, helps the lawyers, helps the judges, helps the court personnel, helps the jurors around, just to make the process run smoothly. You should not affect the outcome of the process. And when you write a book and start making money off certain outcomes, I have a hard time believing that you really are fair and fair and balanced in your position as the clerk of court. And I think the fact that she's a publicly elected official is why all of this needs to happen in the public. And they want the public to be frustrated and outraged at this elected official's conduct.
As we were talking about earlier before the press conference, Peter and I were discussing. Peter said that these are obviously serious allegations of Becky Hill, talking about, of course, that the allegations that she pressured them into a quick verdict. And one thing that was really emphasized, too, in this press, we're about to get to your hashtag HJB, hashtag lawyer, questions and comments really quickly here, folks. But one more point I want to make is the smoking breaks. The idea, I believe that the number that they put out was that there were 6 jurors who were smokers, and that there's this allegation that's been put forth in this court filing that they couldn't take a smoking break until they reached a verdict because they wanted to get to a verdict expeditiously. That's going to make some headlines. And I mean, have you ever heard of anything like that, Peter? Not being able to take a smoke break, and also too, how procedural are smoke breaks when you have people that are smokers that are part of a jury?
So I'll just talk about my experience in trying cases. I have never had a judge tell me no if I requested something for the comfort of a juror, something that makes it easier. If they need to eat more, if they need to stand more, if they need more bathroom breaks, if they need smoke breaks, if they need, to go eat something that has sugar in it. I mean, we have made accommodations for every type of juror you could think of. And I've never had a judge say no. I've definitely never had the input of a clerk of court on any of those decisions. So I don't know if the lawyers didn't know this was happening, if they didn't ask about it, if this was a surprise to them, but I would feel like this was not something that was requested and denied. So I'm trying to figure out how we got there, that they were not allowed to take smoke breaks, even though they wanted to as members of the jury.
Very interesting, and we'll see again. Two sides to every story, folks. We're still. This is a developing story. We are yet to hear from the prosecution side of things. We're yet to hear from Becky Hill, her being a elected official there in South Carolina. But also worth noting that part of this court filing, Harpootlian and Griffin, they interviewed two jurors. And then I believe the third person was an alternate juror. Peter, if you're seeing that the same that I'm seeing it.
So I haven't seen it, but I thought they said something about 4 jurors. And I know there's also an affidavit of Harpootlian's paralegal. So I don't know if she talked to a juror and then filed an affidavit about those conversations. I'm not positive. I haven't seen them. I don't know if you have the documents, want to email them to me to take a look at or something, but I haven't seen the affidavits yet. It's just all reports. And it all matches up with what they said. And when you're talking about two sides to every story, I do think it's important that you mention the prosecutor's office, the AG. They're going to have a side to this story. They're going to want to talk through this. They're going to want to interview these jurors. They're going to want to talk to Becky Hill, because were these actually conversations where she was asserting her authority and opinion? Or did a juror say, you can't believe anything that slimeball Alex Murdaugh said, and she just said, oh, haha, or yup, or whatever, something innocuous, and then this is taken to mean that she was trying to pressure them? Because there's a lot of ways that this can be technically true, but maybe not as bad as it sounds right now. And that's why we kind of have to wait to hear everybody's side.
Yeah, that's how much this tainted the process, right? And that, of course, is going to be an interesting legal thread going forward, how much this influenced the outcome. Even if it wasn't procedural, did it influence the outcome with the verdict that the jury ultimately reached? We only have 5 more minutes, folks. Peter's time's precious, and he's getting ready, of course, for his stream on his channel coming up a little bit later on this afternoon. So Peter, I'm going to try to go rapid fire here through as many of these questions with hashtag lawyer, hashtag HeyJB. Let's go right here to Nicole in our YouTube comment section saying, hashtags for us both. What evidence could they have besides quote unquote testimony to prove any of this? Testimony is supposed to be the truth, but that doesn't mean that it's always the case. I'm Nicole. I don't know. Maybe Nicole is referencing if there's any video from inside the courtroom, or because right now what Nicole is saying is that this is based on hearsay from what we're seeing.
Well, I mean, they have the testimony, but they also have the Facebook posts, or the lack of Facebook posts. They have the timeline of the Facebook posts, which again will corroborate that testimony. And then I think what's really important is if this goes back before Judge Newman eventually, they have the context that he remembers being a part of some of these conversations and some of these meetings, and hearing some of these statements from Becky Hill that if they are not true, or if the jury contradicts what she told Judge Newman, or if Judge Newman didn't know that the clerk of court didn't let them take smoke breaks anymore, or something like that, that would be very significant for his own memory and his own experience and looking at this to try to figure out what happened. So witness and jury testimony is very important, but I think there are some other corroborating materials that could help them prove this point.
Let's go to this question that just came in from Brandon. It's a good question, Brandon. Hashtag HeyJB. If what the defense is saying is true, would there be charges pressed against the clerk?
They're requesting an investigation by the FBI and the United States Attorney's Office, which is the federal prosecutors. And I think that it's possible. These allegations could be true enough to grant a new trial, but still not enough for criminal charges, or they could be true enough for both, or they could end up resulting in neither. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to all fall along the same line. The evidence will push towards the just outcome in each individual circumstance.
It's a very interesting question, Brandon. And look, as far as how this all unfolds going forward, I mean, so Ashley, we were talking about this earlier. Ashley says, hashtag HeyJB, do you expect a response from the prosecution, or will they just handle it in their motions? Of course, Becky Hill is going to have her own counsel. She's going to have her own legal advice provided to her, and she's a elected official. So by all means, she could issue a statement. She could speak independently of any court motion in response to this. But as far as the prosecutors in this case, as far as the state goes, Peter, where do they fit in here?
I don't think they're going to say anything until they know more information. I think they're going to want to look at these affidavits, potentially talk to the jurors. They don't want to step in it. They don't want to put their foot in their mouth. They don't want to say this is all baloney if they don't actually know what the juror said. So I think they're going to want to gather some more information before they make a statement. And on Becky Hill's statement, if I was her lawyer, I'd give her some advice to remain silent at this point. When they're pressing for criminal charges and they're telling the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI to investigate this, and they're making some very serious criminal allegations, I'd be surprised if she came out and made a public statement at this point. If she does, if it's anything but vanilla, it could and will be used against her in the future, would be my guess. Ali or Ollie, hashtags for us both. Do you think Alex has any possibility of being found innocent if the trial starts all over again? And do you think Alex would want to testify again? This, it's funny. I'm trying to get you out of here quick. This one comment could be the subject of a 30-minute live stream between you and I. But what do you think? So is there a possibility? Is the words of the question, and words are important? Yes, there is a possibility. It would still be a uphill battle and very difficult for him to win, but there'd be a possibility because it's a trial. And number two, once he testifies once and all of that information is already out there and under oath, it's more likely he would testify again, but you never know. He doesn't have to just because he did the first time. Right. I mean, we all remember the testimony when, of course, he was extremely visibly upset, tears running down his face. I think it's fair to say that he very much needed a tissue up there as well when he was testifying on the stand. We'll pay close attention to this. Peter, I'll get you out on this. It follows up that question. He's also facing charges related to financial crimes. I think that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 plus to 100 or so, in that neighborhood of charges. The last time I checked on the financial charges, it was really 5+ months ago. So I don't know how many of them have still stuck up until this point. But we're talking about just a very, very long line of people who want their day in court. People that were allegedly swindled out of money by Alex Murdaugh, who want their day in court. Is there any doubt in your mind that Alex Murdaugh, even if he were to get a new trial, which some would point to perhaps as a Hail Mary, other people would say it's even more of a Hail Mary for him to be exonerated in a new trial. If all those things were to unfold and he were to be cleared as far as the murders of Maggie and Paul you see there on your screen, we're still talking about an extremely long list of charges. Is there any doubt in your mind, Peter, that Alex Murdaugh is going to spend the rest of his life, he is now 64 years old, the rest of his life behind bars? Yeah, to me, the only question is where is he going to serve his time, not if. He's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. Reports are that he's going to plead to those federal charges that carry with them 20 and 30 years, multiple times over. Now, the interesting part of this, and there's some legal angles that I've talked about in some other videos if anybody wants a deeper dive, but usually you end up serving time in the prison that you're sentenced in first. Right now, that's state prison because he was convicted of these murders and sentenced to life in prison. So any federal crimes that he pleads to would be served after this life sentence, which is obviously impossible. However, if he pleads to those federal charges and gets sentenced, and this case gets overturned and gets set for a new trial, and he gets sentenced to federal prison, then there is a possibility that he serves his time in what some people refer to as club fed, as it is a much less severe and hard place to serve your time in federal prison than state prison. Not that it's where you want to go or where anybody would want to go, but if you have a choice, just about everybody would choose to serve their time in federal prison, not state prison. Peter Tragos, the lawyer right here in our Tampa Bay area. Peter, I wouldn't let you go without you being able to let people know if they want to find your live stream where you're going to be doing more of that deep dive that you just talked about. Where can they find you? Yeah, the YouTube channel is called Lawyer on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, wherever you want to check us out. We do content on all the cases that JB talks about and that are going on around the world and around the country, criminal cases, civil cases, just to try to help people understand what their rights are, understand the justice system, answer questions, and just kind of try to learn together what the people and the public feel like, and get the angle from an attorney and how we look at these cases and how we go to trial on these cases, because I try cases myself and have an active practice as well. So we try to do it and learn together on our channel as often as we can, and we'll be doing it a little bit later today as well. Yeah,
someone tagged us in a post on Twitter, Peter, comparing our hairstyles, and people were asking, who. I'm going to squash this right now. I don't stand next to you when it comes to that battle.
I just have more. I think it's very different styles. Just because I have more doesn't mean it's better. I think it's a great question, but I think it just shows you can have great hair with different styles. That's all you need.
Well, it's
Find the style that works for you. That's what I say.
It's great analysis as always. Peter, thank you so much. I'll be looking for your show on your channel. Thanks as always for joining us here on WFLA Now.
Appreciate it, man. Take it easy.
All right, Peter, take care. Back here with you on stream, folks. JB here with you live, and we'll try to answer some follow-up questions here in the comment section. Of course, I cannot, not being an attorney myself, I cannot do a super thorough legal analysis of the super legal questions, so to speak. But I will do my very best as far as providing context here. Ali, following up, do his attorneys want cameras banned in the courtroom? That seems to be a big deal for the defense, but I haven't heard too much about it in this case. No, you heard Harpootlian say there that no, they are in favor. They want all of these hearings to be public, provided that it is procedural for them to be public. It is the Bryan Kohberger case in Idaho, where cameras being allowed in the courtroom and camera procedure and court policy related to live streaming and the use of video is under the microscope. That's the one that we're paying very close attention to. Really, transparency has never been a problem with this trial. The court policy in South Carolina was you could see it here on your screen. We had multiple camera angles inside the courtroom. Meanwhile, we have in Idaho, we have a photographer, a photojournalist, or a videographer, if you will, who zoomed in on Bryan Kohberger and found himself or herself in hot water because they zoomed in on the suspect, when in reality that was commonplace with the South Carolina trial of Alex Murdaugh. So 2 different states, different jurisdictions, different court policies, and so that's really more of a problem, or if you want to identify it as a problem, more of a talking point that has to be addressed in Idaho rather than here in South Carolina. Looking here at some other comments and questions that are coming in. Yeah, folks, go follow Peter. He really does a great job of answering questions. He does something very similar to what we do here as far as answering your questions, your legal questions. It's just a bonus that he's here with us and that he's been with us in the Stream Center in the past. Very, very lucky that we have a lot of great live streamers in Tampa Bay or in Central Florida. This is a great question from August Baby. #HeyJB. Would this open the door potentially for a review of other cases she worked on as a clerk? Yeah, it could open a can of worms, I'm sure. That's entirely possible. If you were somebody who was convicted of a crime and it was done so with Becky Hill as a clerk of court, and Alex Murdaugh gets a new trial on these based on this motion, could it open up that can of worms where you're going to have others trying to file the same exact sort of? Well, look, there's some unique circumstance to this case based on the on what those jurors told Harpootlian and Griffin and the Murdaugh defense team. The fact that there was a book written and released months after the trial culminated with the guilty verdict. There's a lot of very particular, ingredients, if you will, that led to this us reaching this point. So it would be a stretch for a judge to consider other appeals, I would imagine. Again, not an expert but it would be a stretch for, a laundry list of appeals to come through and be entertained, given if this one happens to be ultimately successful. Let's see here. Karen, #AJB, will Alex remain in jail if they do a retrial? Yes. He remains in custody now. A lot of what has been going on behind bars, including jailhouse selfies and love letters being written to Alex Murdaugh. A lot of that has found its way out, leaked to the media, if you will, and various publications have picked that up. It's been a very eventful few months in prison for Alex Murdaugh since he was found guilty, and of course, so many people knowing his name, and also as well, I mean, how many documentaries have there been? My goodness, it almost seems as if we are now in a world where when there is a high-profile trial, that just about every single streaming service will be trying to release their own documentary. Documentaries in the true crime space with streaming services are absolutely massive. I know that Max had one. I believe Netflix had one. I mean, these documentaries are being consumed at such a voluminous rate that, that it's an interesting trend that we are following because people are watching these documentaries more than ever before. And it's getting to the point now where, based on the reports, even the attorney for Alex Murdaugh was recording jailhouse conversations, the reading of the reading of statements in the past for the documentary on Fox Nation. I mean, this is my goodness, this is we're getting to a world now where so much revolve around the production of these documentaries because it changes public perception of how a case, how really the public treats a case. How facts are presented in those documentaries is a huge talking point. We do it here. Of course, here in the news industry, we're always presenting fact in real time. We're trying to present everybody, of course, with expert analysis in relation to that. But these documentaries now are being cranked out at such a rate that so many people are not even watching the trials. They're just watching the documentaries and missing so many of the other, of what goes on in these trials, what goes on actually with these particular cases and investigations. They're watching it through the prism of the documentary filmmakers that are putting these together. So it's a lot, man. Documentaries left and right. And look, I've watched them. They fit into that space of how the public reacts to a particular case, because how something is presented in a documentary can influence public perception of a case like the Murdaugh trial. There's no doubt. We've seen it with so many cases about how the public will fixate on a certain point because it was demonstrated in a documentary by a documentary filmmaker. Look at the case with Stephen Smith. His body was exhumed months ago, and that case officially reopened. And a lot of people believe that was because so much of that was made in the documentary. I mean, you didn't hear too much. Comparatively to other things at trial, you didn't hear too much about Stephen Smith during the Murdaugh case, but in the documentary world, in the documentary, the pieces that were released on these streaming services, Stephen Smith was a major point of those documentary efforts. And here we are, and that case has been reopened. A lot of people are asking for a recap. Yeah, let's go for a recap really quickly, and I'll do my very best here to read my notes. Alex Murdaugh's defense team, they have filed a lengthy court motion seeking a new trial, and it's all focused on the allegations surrounding Rebecca Hill, or Becky Hill. She's the Colleton County Clerk of Court. Becky Hill is accused of pressuring the jury into reaching a quick verdict having frequent private conversations with the jury foreperson to sway a guilty verdict or to influence the jury process. And then, of course, her releasing a book and also, making, appearances. She was on the Today Show. There's just been a lot of allegations pertaining to her conduct, but really at the heart of it is that she is accused of, we haven't heard from Becky Hill, we haven't heard the other side of the story, but she is accused of acting outside of her role of the clerk of court, and upon acting outside of her role in what is standard court procedure, she did so with the intentions of releasing a book and in doing so influenced the jury into the decision that was ultimately reached, which was a guilty verdict for Alex Murdaugh in the murders of his wife Maggie and son Paul, leading to a double life sentence in South Carolina. Hill, according to the court motions, instructed the jury panel to watch him closely, look at his actions. There are many serious allegations, and they came to these conclusions, according to Griffin and Arputli and the Alex Murdaugh defense team. They interviewed a couple of the jurors and put together this very lengthy court motion in seeking a new trial. According to our legal expert, the lawyer this is going to be examined thoroughly, and we have a scenario at play here where where the conduct of Becky Hill, if it's proven to be true, and if it's proven to have influenced the jury's verdict, this could be another trial for Alex Murdaugh in the murders of his wife and son. Something that seemed absolutely this outrageous, impossible concept months ago, all of a sudden is a possibility here. Now, we haven't heard from the other side. There's, of course, the second side to be heard in this case, but these are serious allegations that are going to have to be treated seriously and thoroughly investigated as they determine whether or not a second trial is warranted. Again, there are 100 state criminal charges for financial crimes. That's among that embezzlement, money laundering. There's all of these conspiracy-related charges that factor in to the roughly 100 financial charges. Alex Murdaugh is accused still of swindling people out of their money, really accumulating millions of dollars that he used to, of course, fund his lifestyle and feed his self-admitted opioid addiction. This is something that is still in our future. People still deserve their day in court. If you're the person who lost $650,000, $1 million, or a large, even if it's a small sum, even if it's a few $1,000s, doesn't matter the sum. If you are somebody who was supposed to receive a settlement in a case that Alex Murdaugh worked on, and that money never went to you because of Alex Murdaugh and because of his financial crimes, you deserve your day in court. If you want your day in court, you deserve your day in court. And so there are people that are waiting in line very patiently for their day in court for Alex Murdaugh to answer to the crime that he committed or is alleged to have committed in relation to that individual person, that individual victim. And so there's still a lot to be decided as far as punishment for Alex Murdaugh should he be found guilty of any of the roughly 100 state criminal charges related to his financial crimes or the allegations of his financial crimes. A lot of these crimes that he has alluded to himself over the course of the double murder trial, about how explaining a bit of what his life was like over the course of the time period when Maggie and Paul were killed. And folks, with that, I think we're going to wrap things up here. Man, Facebook, quickly, we've been having connection problems with Facebook. Dawn on Facebook is saying that my voice has changed. That's a problem. We have to get that fixed with Facebook. Really quickly, folks on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, as we end out our live stream, if you guys could, I'm going to read the comments here afterwards after we hop off stream, but if you guys could provide some feedback. Audio problems. I know that YouTube has in large part been working, but Facebook, for some reason, Facebook, as far as them receiving our signal, it's just been it's been a journey these last few weeks, trying to get a reliable signal between us here in the stream center and the servers over at Facebook. So if that's something that you could provide us with, that would be very helpful as far as the audio signal quality. Is my voice changing on Facebook Live? I mean, my voice just changed right there in that moment, but if there's any changes as far as my the voice or any audio, any skipping, freezing, anything like that, please let us know, because our ability to feed to Facebook obviously is extremely important, as is YouTube, as is all of our other platforms. And we always want to make sure that we're able to reach you guys without any technical difficulty. Thank you so much for joining us here in the Stream Center. This has been the press conference with Alex Murdaugh's defense attorneys seeking a new trial, accusing the Court of Clerk Becky Hill of jury tampering. We'll pay very close attention to where this goes in the months and maybe year or so ahead. It could be a lengthy legal journey as far as how far down this rabbit hole goes, but we'll be paying close attention to it. Thanks so much for joining us here in the Stream Center. Your feedback is very much appreciated, and we'll see you next time here on WFLA Now.